Hi, I'm Mary Watson. I'm a professor of organic chemistry at the University of Delaware, and I'm excited to walk you through some of what my group does while we look at this poster together. My group works on transition metal catalysis of non-traditional electrophiles. That's what we call electrophiles that people haven't used before in these types of reactions or don't typically use. I'll get into the details of our research in a minute, but first I just want to tell you a little bit about my group. Our group is about 10 graduate students, a few undergrads, and a few postdocs at any time, and we really work as a team. We also set high expectations for ourselves and each other. We also love to celebrate birthdays and accomplishments in the lab with cake or hot chocolate or other get togethers. Most of our funding comes from the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation. We've also gotten some funding from collaborators at Pfizer, and we have a brand new grant funded by the Center for Plastics Innovation, which is led by some of my colleagues in chemical engineering and material science here at UD. Our research is inspired by how powerful metal catalyzed cross-couplings have been in organic synthesis. In particular, we think a lot about the palladium catalyzed cross-couplings that were developed by Professor Richard Heck and others, and how amazing it has been in pharmaceutical and polymer synthesis that we have this technology to form new bonds to unsaturated carbon atoms. We're also really excited that pharmaceuticals and polymer synthesis are now evolving to include more and more content of sp3 hybridized carbons. And this gives us new opportunities for transition metal catalysis. And we think a lot about the stereochemistry of these saturated carbon centers, as well as identifying new X groups that we can use to identify new starting material classes for these types of cross-coupling. We spend most of our time working on the discovery, optimization, and demonstration of generality of these reactions, and we call that reaction discovery. We use a variety of techniques, including classic techniques, setting things up on relatively small scale in a glove box. We've also started to implement the use of high throughput experimentation techniques, which allow us to run 96 reactions at a time. We have a whole suite of analytical instrumentation to be able to figure out what's gone on in those reactions, visualize the data, and make decisions about what the right next experiments are. We also spend quite a bit of time thinking about the potential mechanisms of our reactions, and we do that both by isolating potential catalytic intermediates or active catalysts and through a series of physical or organic studies. We also have a feedback loop for our reaction discovery efforts in terms of thinking about how we're providing access to important targets for other chemists. And we work with collaborators in the pharmaceutical industry and collaborators in material science and polymer chemistry so that we're sure that our research is impactful to the broadest extent possible. So now I'll take you through some of the specific projects ongoing in my lab. In this project 1, we're working on enantioselective additions to carbocations, and specifically cyclic carbocations that are stabilized as either oxocarbenium or aminiamine intermediates, where they have an oxygen or a nitrogen next door. The way we do these reactions is we catalytically generate a chiral organometallic nucleophile using catalytic copper 1, a chiral ligand, and an acetylide. By using these chiral nucleophiles, we're able to control whether the nucleophile adds to the front or the back face of these cyclic cations. The reason we're interested in doing this is that we can easily form these cationic intermediates from readily available starting materials. And these types of products that have alpha stereocenters next to an oxygen or nitrogen heteroatom are present in a wide number of bioactive molecules, some of the examples of which are shown here. When we started this work, we focused on stabilized oxocarbenium and aminiamides. We call these stabilized because when you ionize the acetyl precursor using a Lewis acid, you make an oxocarbeniamine that's stabilized by resonance into an aromatic ring or as an aromatic structure itself. These types of oxocarbeniamides are typically easier to form, and we also can exploit the fact that we've got these aromatic rings to help us control the enantioselectivity using a chiral catalyst. One of the cool things that we've done with this is not only to make tertiary or tri-substituted stereocenters, but we can actually bring in fully substituted acetals and deliver products that have tetrasubstituted stereocenters in exceptional levels in enantiomeric excess. And we've done this both to make oxygen heterocycles as well as to make valuable nitrogen heterocycles. The other part of this project that we love is that we have lots of questions about what the active catalysts are in these systems, and this gives us an opportunity to study the potential structures of the catalysts that we make by combination of the copper salt and these sorts of pi box or bisoxazolane ligands. And this is one example here where you can see that two ligands wrap around two copper centers, and then those have a bridging counteranion. There is a counteranion that is left out of the structure as well, just for clarity. And so this is an ongoing challenge in the group, not only to develop new reactions, but also to understand how the catalyst controls the enantioselectivity in these systems. We're also very interested in moving towards harder substrates where the oxocarbenium and iminium ions wouldn't be stabilized by resonance. This means that these types of iminium ions or oxocarbenium ions are much more prone to elimination and decomposition reactions. And they also lack that sort of aromatic handle to be able to help us control the enantioselectivity. Nonetheless, we're really excited. One of our most recent papers is identifying a catalyst system that controls the enantioselectivity in addition to these sort of cyclic iminium ions and delivers these alpha chiral nitrogen heterocycles with an easily removed carbamate protecting group on the nitrogen. We're also excited to develop diastereoselective reactions, and we've done this in a difunctionalization reaction using essentially solvent molecules as our starting materials, undergoing a bromination reaction, followed by a highly diastereoselective alkynylation, now using a zinc catalyst instead of the copper. A second project in our group is also involved with determining a way to make highly enantioenriched product. But in this case, instead of going through an achiral starting intermediate, we start with highly enantioenriched amine or alcohol derivatives and use a simple achiral nickel catalyst to convert those into highly enantioenriched products. So these are not enantioselective reactions, but rather stereospecific ones where the chirality of the starting material is maintained in the formation of the product. In this case in particular, we're targeting the formation of di or triaryl alkanes, a number of which are present in bioactive molecules like detrol La and Zoloft. We started out in this project by thinking about how valuable it would be to be able to convert a benzylic amine into a highly enantioenriched diaryl alkane. Benzylic amines can be prepared in high enantiomeric excess, essentially always greater than 95% E via very robust methods. And so what we did was we took these starting materials, we converted them to trimethyl ammonium salts, which weakened the carbon-nitrogen bond and allowed us to enter a nickel-catalyzed catalytic cycle that led to a cross-coupling with an aeroboronic reagent. And we were really excited to be able to do this and demonstrate for the first time that you could use a benzylic electrophile in a Suzuki-Miura reaction to deliver highly enantioenriched products. We went on then to do a Miura borylation reaction of the same sorts of starting materials to deliver highly enantioenriched benzylic boronates as well. As we were working on this chemistry, we realized there would be value to not only being able to use benzylic amines as starting materials, but also benzylic alcohols. And in particular, what hadn't been done when we started in this work was conditions to allow the cross-coupling of an alcohol-derived substrate with a boronic reagent. And so we identified conditions that would allow this type of reaction by activating the alcohol as a pivolate, and this then allowed the nickel-catalyzed cross-coupling with an aryl boroxine coupling partner. And we can do this not only to form tertiary stereocenters, but also to form all carbon quaternary stereocenters, which are otherwise very, very difficult to make. We envision that this reaction likely proceeds via fairly typical Suzuki-Miura cross-coupling, wherein you do an oxidative addition, a transmetallation, and a reductive elimination step. The interesting part is the stereochemistry of the oxidative addition. And so what we see here is that this reaction can either go with inversion of stereochemistry as shown, or retention of stereochemistry, depending on the leaving group and the nickel catalyst, as well as some of the other reaction parameters. And we believe that the nickel adds to the ortho position of this aromatic group as so-called SN2' type attack. Understanding this mechanism is what led us to test these tertiary acetates in this type of reaction, because we thought that we would be able to still achieve this oxidative addition, even with increased steric bulk at the benzylic position. Because of this mechanism, we've also focused on related cross-couplings of allylic pivolates which proceed via a very similar mechanism, going through a pi-allyl nickel intermediate instead of the pi-benzyl intermediate that you see here. The last project I'll tell you about right now is actually still using an alkyl amine derivative in a nickel catalyzed cross coupling. But now, instead of a benzylic group, which electronically activates the carbon-nitrogen bond, the alkyl group will be unactivated. We wondered if we could find an activating group for nitrogen that would allow this chemistry to work. And the reason we wanted to do that is because there's a wide variety of alkylamines in drug-like molecules, as well as simple starting materials that can be used for diversity-oriented synthesis efforts, as well as in biomolecules such as lysine side chain. We accomplish this by converting the alkylamine starting material into these 2,4,6-triphenylpyridinium salts, or Kotrytsky pyridinium salts. These are now active alkyl electrophiles in nickel catalyzed cross couplings, like the Suzuki-Mura aerolation shown here. In contrast to the catalytic cycle I showed you for our stereospecific cross couplings, we believe that these reactions likely go through a nickel 1,3 catalytic cycle, wherein a nickel 1 catalyst undergoes transmetallation with an arylbronic acid to make these nickel 1 arenes. These nickel 1 arenes could then transfer an electron to the pyridinium ring, generating these neutral pyridyl radicals, which fragment to release an alkyl radical. This alkyl radical can recombine with a weighting nickel 2, generating a nickel 3 intermediate, which is poised for reductive elimination and closing the catalytic cycle. Thinking about this mechanism, we really zeroed in on what we might be able to do by focusing on the fact that we're going through these alkyl radicals. And we've identified other classes of alkyl pyridiniums, which would go through stabilized alkyl radicals and therefore occur under even more robust reaction conditions. We've also worked on other coupling partners that we can plug into this reaction. Some examples of those reactions are shown here, where we can take amino acids and convert them into propionic acid derivatives, some of which are NSAIDs. We collaborated with researchers at Pfizer to be able to do an arylation reaction using hetero-aryl substituted benzylic amines. And we also collaborated with the same team at Pfizer to be able to do a reductive coupling because aryl bromides are even more available and diverse starting material class than arylboronic acids. In addition, to be able to form sp3 to sp2 bonds, we've also focused on alkyl-alkyl cross couplings using Negishi reactions or Suzuki reactions using reagents that we form in situ via hydroboration of olefins. And most recently, we've collaborated with Dan Wicks at University of Wisconsin to be able to use his activated ester chemistry to be able to do ketone formation using these alkylamines with his special reagents. We're really excited to continue developing this chemistry as well as all the other chemistry that I've shown you on the slide. I hope I get to meet you at least via Zoom and hopefully on our campus this fall. Thanks for checking out the University of Delaware and thanks for checking out my research. I'd love to talk with you soon.